Well, as you know, a couple of, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, we said goodbye, of course, to Will Atkinson, and his time, of course, at Conservative Home had drawn to an end. However, as I said back then, it was inevitable, of course, that we would still be covering Conservative Home because, quite frankly, as I've said before, it is one of the best comedy websites online. You get some right shall we say, humdingers. And we've certainly got one today because I think we are already identifying who our new who our new favorite punching bag is over at Conservative Home, and it is a guy by the name called Harry Phibbs. And seriously, if that is an alias, that is like the worst alias you have chosen, my friend. But if this guy is actually seriously called Harry Phibbs, good God, man, please write weekly in Conservative Home because, quite frankly, your comedy stylings that you are writing in Conservative Home are absolute utter genius. You would have to go out into, I don't know, Sheffield, Leeds to a comedy club or somewhere in London to see this level of pure good comedy gold. However, enough of that. I think you get the picture. But of course, as always, before we do get on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link where you can, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel as well. Let's crack on then into this. So, where to begin? So, ah, like I say, get ready, strap in. This is going to be fun. So, from Conservative Home by Harry Phibbs. God, if that is an alias, you sir are a genius for choosing that alias. But anyway, the title of this is "We have dodged the bullet of the EU's customs union. Now let us embrace free trade utilitarianism." So this is it, guys. Free market fundamentalism. Just engage in it, full tilt. Singapore on the Thames. Go. Anyway, trade provides mutual benefit. Otherwise, people would not engage in it. Specializations is, of course, far more efficient and allows greater prosperity than in a substantive economy where we are all scrambling about trying to do everything for ourselves. Adam Smith illustrated the advantages of the division of labor with the example of the pin factory. Comparing the output with 18 workers, each doing a very specific task, with one worker laboriously going through each process himself just to make a pin. This was in his book, The Wealth of Nations, back in 1776. And boy, people are still obsessed with that today. And you can look back at this, by the way. There are a lot of criticisms, even back at that time. People wrote criticisms back of Wealth of Nations back then, and there are a lot of people who even say now, for example, the Adam Smith Institute, that I like glued to the ideology because, again, it's a free market fundamentalist group, obsessed with that idea and notion. But of course, there are still even modern criticisms of Wealth of Nations. But anyway, back to this. So, of course, the benefit of trade does apply not only to those trading with the country, but of course, those trading with people abroad. So it follows that the government should endeavour, wherever possible, to keep out of the way, as preventing trade from taking place is harmful. It's not that a government prevents trade. It's not that a government prevents trade. The main thing here is that a lot of trade goes through a lot of government-funded infrastructure. So if a company wants to take part in that trade, then, it should probably have to pay some form of maybe tariff or, tax maybe to participate in that trade. Because at the end of the day, you also have to worry about your own homegrown industries as well. Because the wealth of nations, for example, never took into account the fact of industrialization. Like, remember, Wealth of Nations was written pre-industrial revolution. Like, the industrial revolution had really yet to take off. It doesn't counter into fact any of those now, or even how our modern functioning economies work. Doesn't even counter fact we have things like, gigantic robot arms that are programmed to do these things. There's a lot more complex stuff that goes into the business and the economy and trade and how all that functions. It is a very, very, complex, system of things that are constantly moving. So reaching back to a book written back in 1776, I don't think maybe is the best place to start for your economic theory. But there you go. So forgive me, of course, if these messages are obvious to you. Such heavy insights have been widely accepted for nearly 250 years, but these arguments are, of course, never settled. Even when some of us regard the case of overwhelmingly intelligent, knowledgeable people I usually agree with, are more the advocates for protectionism. I was dismayed to hear Danny Kruger, the MP, making such a case as the National Conservative Conference just 3 years ago. So, protectionism. Ideally, you protect your country's businesses, your manufacturing base, because you need those to function. This guy is basically proclaiming completely open free markets. And I can guarantee you at some point, he will be arguing that we do away with all tariffs and anything like that. Just open the floodgates. Well, guess what? We did this experiment. We did it during the Victorian age. As I've talked about this before, this is a bizarre historical anomaly that they don't realize we've done this experiment before. It did not work. So we did this. In fact, the whole first ever world exhibition in Crystal Palace was done as a part of that group and faction led by, believe it or not, Prince Albert to do that. And then they did it. They went, right, okay, we'll go full free trade. That experiment lasted, I think, 5 or 6 years before they went, actually, this was actually a really bad idea. And they started, reinforcing the tariffs and such things, etc. Doesn't get talked a lot about, but because that was funded by the Austrian School of Economics, and guess what? Their case of how wonderful and that everything that would make everything failed spectacularly. Why? Agriculture. Agriculture, even back then, was a massive import and export. And we were getting, or at least British farmers were absolutely getting hammered by the amount of cheap corn, wheat, grain coming into the UK from America. That's what ended it. Do they even talk about this point in history? No. Fascinating thing. I think it should be talked about more. I think it really should be brought up more that we've done this experiment back in the Victorian age and it failed. Why are we still arguing for this even now? But there you go. Anyway, so back to this. Just, of course, some personal eccentricity, at least I thought. Then, of course, last month, when the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship in London, where the audience now voted for protectionism. Tony Abbott, Daniel Hannan, proposing that protectionism makes us poorer, were only narrowly defeated by Oren Cass and Michael Gove. Because they are wrong. Because you have to defend your home industries, your home manufacturing base. That means you have to engage in some form of protectionism, be it tariffs. You could argue certainly that regulations are absolutely certainly a form of protectionism because it brings everyone to a level playing field. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. It's not just about tariffs and who we do not trade with on this sort of front. So Even amongst those who accept the general case for free trade, there are, of course, many who suggest that the only problem with tariffs is that other countries will retaliate with their own. Indeed, as we are seeing right now, we're seeing this right now with all the Trump stuff going on. It is, of course, suggested that it is right and proper for us to retaliate with tariffs against countries imposing them on us. It follows from this line of thinking that free trade should only be advanced with a deal, with lengthy and complicated negotiations, with lots of damaging caveats and exemptions. So, yeah, here it comes. Here it comes. Forget trade deals or anything like that. We're just going to go, tariffs gone to zero. Before Trump started, should we say, playing with the tariffs, tariffs around the world were an all-time low. An all-time low. Right? Always bear that in mind. And yet, we need to get rid of. Anyway, some trade negotiators, Mr. Phibbs continues, with the stress of the materials. With the stress. Back to the beginning of that. Some trade negotiators do, of course, stress the merits of bilateral agreements. Others, multilateral ones. I'm a unilateralist. Unlike the debate about nuclear disarmament back in the 1980s, a unilateralist embraces, of course, free trade in our country's interest. It would not stop us from signing treaties with other like-minded countries. Codifying such agreements provides clarity and confidence that they won't be disrupted. Such agreements can certainly offer great advantages. The UK joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership will give us an extra celebration last Christmas. And then once those secret courts start kicking in, oh boy, yeah, everyone forgets about this, that in that agreement, there's that thing about secret courts that, if, let's say, Canada or New Zealand or Australia take us to court about our regulations, about our high standards that we have over meat, if they win in that, they then force us to lower our standards. Where is your argument about sovereignty? Because that right there damages our sovereignty. At least in the EU, everyone was voting for this. We were all on the same page. We all got a vote. We all had a say. Not in the Pacific Partnership. If you lose your court case, you are then forced to lower your standards, your regulations as well. So I'm looking forward to when Harry Phibbs encounters that for the first time, if he does, or if he even writes about it. There, of course, might be exceptions where we do restrict trade for non-economic reasons. The sanctions on Russia would come to mind. So, but then you are not a free trade unitarist then, but there you go. Anyway, but as the world hurtles towards a mercantile madness, the UK should now stride unconditionally and without delays towards the opposite path of enlightenment. Oh no. Lifting tariffs on the United States would be a topical place to start because, of course, this goes all the way back to when we were arguing all the way back in 2016 where Jacob Rees-Mogg was like, "Oh, you can just put all our tariffs to zero." They're still doing it. They're still doing it. They're still making this argument. Anyway, we dodged, of course, the bullet of being in the EU customs union, and thus we have an independent trade policy. Why not make the most of it? Why do we impose 10% tariffs on imported American cars? Because we have a British car making industry. And if we don't, then American car making manufacturers are just going to dump cars into the UK as they have done in any other market where American manufacturing, or at least American motor manufacturers, have had a lot of dominance. They have done that. That is why those tariffs are there. Also, it is to protect our own manufacturing industry because American auto manufacturers do get subsidies from the American government, mean that they are their manufacturing sector for that sector specifically makes cheaper auto mobiles, which then sort of undercuts our industry. That's why, as he says here, but why don't we have tariffs on German cars? Because there is no such similar subsidy. Hence, we do not have to worry about our manufacturing, our own homegrown sort of manufacturing competing on that because we are part still of that level playing field. We may not be in the EU customs union, but we are still following a lot of rules and regulations for that. Because if we do, well, then that's going to cause a lot of problem with our biggest trade partner. And again, you'd think if this guy wanted this, if he was like so good about trade, which is all the thing we've argued back for years, the biggest trade benefit, the big bonanza that all these free trade market fundamentalist people should be wanting to be a part of is the single market and customs union. Why give that up? If you are so gung-ho about trade, if you love the Pacific Partnership so much, why not the single market and customs union? That's because, again, ideologically, they don't like it. Even though it would benefit the UK or trade-wise far, far more than any other thing that these guys have been putting out over the years. So we should, of course, abolish the tariff and allow the British consumer to benefit now from greater competition. It is likely Donald Trump would lift the 2.5% tariff on imported British cars, but even if he didn't, it would still be beneficial for us. That would mean a ton of American cars would then flood the market. That would have bad consequences for a lot of our domestic production. And if and again, if he doesn't lift that tariff, why should we not reciprocate on that? You know, why should we not reciprocate on that? So the US has just proposed a 200% tariff on wine and other alcoholic drinks imported from the EU. Thanks to Brexit, that does not apply to us, particularly in the importance of our Scottish whiskey. Why don't we scrap our tariffs on American wine? Because we don't get that much wine from America. Like, I think if you look at where most of the wine comes from the UK, I'm sure there'll be a wine expert in the chat will be when the comments will more than correct me on this, but I believe we drink a heck of a lot of French and Spanish wine compared to American wine. Also, why is Trump going to drop tariffs on us? And bear in mind, April 2nd, we may get that tariff as well. We may get that tariff as well. So who knows on that one? We should also, pardon me, lift our, and this is where it gets really, really ridiculous. We should also lift our tariffs from steel from America and other countries. The great majority of our steel is already imported. So basically, you should just destroy the British steelmaking industry. Thank you very much for that, Harry, if you did that. By making it far more expensive for damaging a great range of our industries, including in the manufacturing, whose ability to compete in the world makes markets is thus harmed. If you want to keep our steel industry going, then subsidies would be less damaging way to do so. But here's the thing. Other countries are going to go, oh, you're subsidizing your steel industry? Well, guess what? To protect our own domestic market, we are going to put a tariff on you so that then it balances out. That is what they will do. That is how it works. That's how it works, Harry. Anyway, also, of course, reducing its energy bills and by ditching net zero targets. This whole ditching of net zero targets is so ridiculous because we've literally just had at the start of this year the only growth industry in the UK right now is our green industries. It is the only growth industries. They have grown 10%. That is a massive growth industry you now want to destroy. Yeah, sorry, but ditching net zero, getting rid of all this stuff is ridiculous, especially, like I said, at the start of this year, since we got that news. But there you go. Last year, we used our Brexit freedoms to lift tariffs on orange juice, almonds, and tofu, amongst other things. But as Catherine McBride said, the entire UK tariff structure requires a very fine tooth comb to eliminate tariff and quotas on goods that we either don't or just can't produce in the UK. There are literally hundreds of thousands of products: rice, buckwheat, milk, quintia, cocoa butter, cocoa powder, roasted coffee, green tea, ground pepper, vanilla, cloves. She goes on. I could go on, but I'm sure you get the idea. We add tariffs to the import of all these foods because all those foods go into all sorts of different things. And here's the thing, and this has been asked before. Why did Brexiteers get so freaked out over the quote bendy banana? That is because the EU had to regulate exactly what a banana is. Like, when you get into all these things, you see this countless times. Like, what exactly is like a marshmallow? What exactly goes into a marshmallow? What exactly is it? Line by line, exactly. And then Brexiteers freaked out because in the banana regulations, they said that a banana is probably about yay bendy. And then they freaked out and said, "Oh my god, the EU's putting regulations on bendy." But no, it's because you have to. You have to be exactly specific because if not, manufacturers and producers will go, "Oh, but don't you see this is a banana?" I mean, I know that sounds really ridiculous, but that happens. They do that all the time to get round things like this. It's happens all the time, but they don't understand it because people like this guy who campaign on a free trade fundamentalist argument do not understand. We've done this argument. We did this back in the Victorian age. It almost destroyed the British farming and agricultural industry. Then, of course, we turned around on that very quickly. They were defeated. They were put into an absolute rout. And Albert was basically told never, ever get involved in politics ever again. So that should, of course, just be the start. Countries that adopt free trade, such as Hong Kong, Singapore, Switzerland, and New Zealand, have become richer. Except they have not adopted free trade. Singapore is a prime example. Oh, let's be like Singapore. 80% of the industries and infrastructure in Singapore is nationalized. Are we going to nationalize that level of infrastructure in the UK all of a sudden? I think all of a sudden Harry would not want to do that, given the fact he's against nationalizing such things. And again, I don't know about New Zealand, but I can guarantee you they haven't, quote, adopted free trade. I can guarantee you in some areas of their industries and sort of country, they are protectionist. I can guarantee you that. Harvey and Milei would also like to see Argentina embrace free trade with the United States. And yeah, how well is Argentina going under Milei's rulership? Not very well. Not very well at all, to be honest. Like I say, eventually Argentina will go off a cliff edge and they will all stop talking about Harvey and Milei. I can guarantee you that. And of course, the United States and with others, but is of course constrained by being in the Mosquier Customs Union with Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. But that benefits it then, because then all these countries are not trying to outcompete each other, especially Brazil. Like that whole customs union, bear in mind, based on the EU's customs union as well, because guess what? We are seeing more of these customs union forming around the world. That is the exact opposite to what this guy said, or at least guys like this, spreading that free market mantra said would happen. Customs unions are becoming more and more of a thing. There's one in the Caribbean, there's a South African one, there's like a West African one forming there. There are a couple that are, actually exist and are in the works as well. So going completely opposite way to the things that Brexiteers predicted. And then, of course, he has Ronald Reagan, who spoke powerfully for free trade. Again, not even going to bother because, free trade, free trade. Of course, it is a very pity that the current independent, the White House, does not see it that way. Yeah, because Trump has no idea what he's doing. Jonathan Millen, in his second book, The Return of Growth, refers to, of course, data from the Fraser Institute and others. Trade liberalization is now correlated with economic growth. The growth in a protectionist versus a liberal country is the regression implies up to 1.5 percentage points per less annum. This is generally accepted, yet the UK's trade freedoms have diminished in recent years. Really? Why then did we get a heck of a lot of growth? A heck of a lot of growth during our time in the EU? Because according to you and this guys, we should have had no economic growth. But no, we did. We enjoyed a lot of economic growth. The big problem we are seeing now is we have reached a peak, and growth now becomes incredibly slow. So we're already up here, but they want the line to go like that, like literally vertical. The thing is now our line is pretty much going straight with like blips like that. It's slow growth, but it's growth. But guys like this and this with this free trade fundamentalism can't accept that, because we have to now really rethink our economy and how we look at growth and how we look at the country as a whole. We should be rethinking that, because you get a lot of businesses that don't have ridiculous growth year on year on year, but they do quite well. They're still in business. They're just not growing like 10, 20, 30% a year, but they go on quite well. They make money. They're fine. But not according to this guy. That guy would probably call those companies zombie companies. We have to have, I think, a fundamental rethink of how we look at growth and how we look at economic growth as well. And that there's more really to economic growth than just, oh my word, line go up. Because they've been talking about, oh, look how Europe's stagnating but it's had the most steady, consistent growth out of any economy in the world in Europe. Yeah, it's not, line go up like that, but it's like that. And it has matched other countries more slowly, yes, but it is growth. But no, these free market fundamentalists are obsessed with this idea that growth, growth, growth. There's more stuff going on in the economy than just growth, but they can't look anywhere else than that. But anyway, let's finish this off. So the Prime Minister does insist that the government's, of course, central mission is to grow the economy. On Friday came the news the economy shrank back in January. If he wants to, of course, do better, then he would, of course, open up the economy with radical, confident policy of free trade. It would be ironic, given all the efforts made to thwart Brexit, that it now offers him the chance to achieve his principal objective. Except, no, it wouldn't. A lot of people voted for Brexit because they were told this would be less globalization. And yet he is arguing for more globalization. Free trade is the exact opposite of what many people voted for. But there you go. And of course, hey, if he does want to achieve growth, why not join, the single market customs union? That would achieve growth. This guy would be outraged, of course, that he would even suggest such an idea. But no, that would achieve growth. Anyway, so of course it might get, of course, teased a bit, but there would be, of course, modern burden for him to bear compared to the alternative of 4 years of stagnation. The verdict that he would face for that. Um, Yep. Someone immediately puts it here. It is not free trade when China and others use forced labor and massive subsidies. Again, yes, we do know there are still massive issues around that. We aren't all, you know, um, have labor regulations like we do here around the world. So yeah, that is true. And of course, massive subsidies indeed, especially with China, especially that Chinese steel, because he never talks about a problem about what is called Chinese dumping, where China will just dump a load of products into a country to like destroy its domestic market. They've done this with steel. They tried this a couple of years ago with bicycles into the EU. They do it all the time. Anyway, and again, how would we fight back against that? How would we fight back against that? I would love to hear how we would fight back against China if we went through on this massive free trade, fundamentalist mindset. How we would fight back against that. But there you go. Anyway, of course, it's not even, of course, really free trade when we specifically refuse to create a competitive environment at home. Policy decisions, of course, make us even less competitive, expensive energy, high taxes, etc. The result is that no one can compete here. Again, that's wrong. There are businesses opening all the time here in the UK. There are businesses opening all the time here in the UK. High taxes, yes. Expensive energy, absolutely. That is something really this government should be taking to task, and they are doing that with their net zero initiatives by building more of that net zero stuff. So we aren't then reliant on gas, which is part of the massive problem we are experiencing with high energy prices, because we went all in on gas, which was a stupid idea, quite frankly, given that. But there you go. A perfect micro example is that of Delaware. No. Okay. Which has now been home to very many companies for a long time because it offered a very attractive taxes and a very reliable legal structure. But one single activist judge ruled that Elon Musk's compensation package at Tesla, which he agreed to not to take based on the salary, but he'd make a huge amount of if he massively increased the value of Tesla, was somehow unfair. Yeah, it was unfair. It was massively unfair. And the judge was right to do that. And of course, the entire legal arguments made by stakeholders could be void for years later, now for political reasons. And the rest is now that many companies are now fleeing the jurisdiction because Delaware is no longer a rock solid, reliable place to exist. If shareholders cannot count on the courts to uphold contracts, there is a huge risk and a new home is now needed. Um, Here's the big problem. All the states in the United States are doing this. They are like constantly out competing each other. But here's the thing. Blue states in particular, outperform massively economically by leaps and bounds red states. I think the exception to that, I believe, is Texas. And the only reason for that is because of all the oil in Texas. If Texas did not have its oil, it would be an incredibly poor state. It would be an incredibly poor state on that one. Then yeah, I think there's a lot of people that don't agree with him on this, which is again quite funny. But yeah, that's Harry Phibbs. Jesus Christ. I hope, like I say, there you see it. I hope that is a pseudonym, my friend. But yeah, conservatives still obsessed with making this free market fundamentalist pitch, even though you can go back to 2016, and as we always said, there were two groups. The two groups, shall we say? They had the free, the global Britain, and of course the leveling up or what would have become the leveling up group. And those were completely incompatible ideologies. And guess which one won out? It wasn't leveling up, it was the Global Britain group. But even they were hamstrung by their own ideas and ideology, and they couldn't understand why they weren't winning. Because, of course, if they follow this free market fundamentalist ideology, they should be winning. You know, leaving the EU should have been the best decision ever for the UK, but it's not turning out like that, is it? Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.